Biden turned out to be an even better president in this respect because he just wasn't there.
Right.
And he was working 4 or 5 hours a day, and it turned out that was too much. Okay.
And these are just 5 questions. There's no right or wrong answer. It's just a way for folks to get a little bit better understanding of yourself. So, silly question number 1.
Okay.
The year is 2070, and the U.S. government finally adopts libertarian policies. What's the first thing that would shock people about this new world?
So it happens abruptly, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
It just
let's just assume one day it's here in 2070.
How little they miss government.
So
when we've had shutdowns in the past that have lasted for a day or two, they immediately go to the park and they show the barricade there and they say they cut off the parks because all the park employees are gone. And so they're trying to scare you because the park is like the most innocuous part of the government. Nobody's really opposed to the park, right? And they use it and they try to shock you with that. But there's a whole bunch of things that the government's doing that are bad, that even when they're trying to help, are destructive to people around them. And I think the need for government is grossly exaggerated. And I think people wouldn't miss it very long. And I would, by the way, point to as evidence, I think Donald Trump was not much of a president during his first term. He was waving around doing crazy things. And he was kind of unmasking how ineffective or impotent the office was, which I thought was actually his best attribute during his first term. He was really showing that it was kind of a wizard behind a curtain type of situation. And we found out how little he was.
Not by design, but...
And then Biden turned out to be an even better president in this respect because he just wasn't there.
Right.
And he was working 4 or 5 hours a day. And it turned out that was too much. And so I just think people wouldn't miss it.
Right. Okay, that's a good answer. Number 2, which historical figure do you think would have made a great Twitter troll?
I don't know why I'm thinking of Abraham Lincoln right now. I tried to think of like other names even as I'm sitting here talking to you, but I'm thinking of him.
Okay.
So Abraham Lincoln had this practice. He actually was a very powerful writer and speaker, and he knew how to use words. Like, this is one of the all-time wordsmiths. I just thought of a second one too that fits in this exact same category. But what people don't know is that when he died, they found a bunch of letters in a drawer. And these were letters he didn't send. So the way that he would handle people that he felt were particularly vexatious to him is, while he was angry, he would sit down and pen an angry note to them. And then he would sit on it. He would put it in a drawer and decide what to do with it. I think he destroyed an overwhelming majority of these letters because they were people even felt it was a little bit out of his character at the time. But apparently he really knew how to turn a phrase. I would say Winston Churchill, though.
That's the one I was thinking.
Fantastic stories of this same direction of him, with Lady Astor and whatnot, where he, Winston, if you were my husband, I would serve you poison. He said, Madam, if I was your husband, I would drink it. So Winston would probably win the award, but for some reason I was thinking of Lincoln's desk drawer.
Yeah, when I write these questions, sometimes just in case my guest asks me for my response, I try to think of an answer as well. And Winston Churchill was the first one that came to my mind, so we're thinking alike on that one. But it's interesting. I did not know that about Lincoln. It kind of mirrors what I do when I'm angry with people, and I write them an angry email. And then I'll put it in my drafts.
Okay, so word to all the people that know you: the moment John kicks the bucket, rush to the drawer.
Yes.
You're going to find out where you really stood with them all along.
Yeah, my wife knows that as well, so she can figure that out too. Yeah. All right. Has there ever been an argument made against libertarianism, Jim, that actually made you pause for a second?
Yes.
What was that argument?
I don't remember what the proper term is. It's not coming to me in my senior state right now, but it has to do with the fact that there are certain areas that are common, and the environment is a commons. And how would we possibly apportion or regulate out people's damage to the environment? Some of these questions are actually relatively easy in this arena, are actually relatively easy to solve, but air pollution stands out in particular. Who owns the air? How do you control the air? And increasingly, I think people would put environment in that category, but I think it's under the same heading. I think it has to do with what kind of pollutants you could put out there. And that is a more difficult question to answer.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think that was Milton Friedman's concern when it came to libertarianism.
It's the only one that works.
Yeah, he had an example where he said, I think it was on the Donahue appearance, where he said, Donahue said, well, what about the particulates coming out of car exhausts, and how do you? And he said that that may be one of the few legitimate roles for government, is to who would you sue? Who would you take to court? Who would you, like, if I get lung cancer because you've been running an exhaust in my backyard all day, but it's floating in from a different area, how do you apportion blame? How do you recover, and things like that? So
yeah, that's a difficult one. And I would say closely related to this, there are no purposes for the federal government. And the only one that is even reasonably defensible is that there is this question of who watches the watchers. And if the federal government's whole role was to keep rogue sheriffs and corrupt state governments, because this was originally kind of a confederation, to make sure that the rights of the people were protected from those actors, well, then I think you could justify the federal government. But you can't justify it on any other ground. You can make a lot of arguments, some of them very interesting and compelling, but in the end, you would lose regardless of what other function you gave the federal government. It just does not work, full stop.
Yeah, I think the only typical ones you hear of are national defense.
National defense is the biggest one. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
courts of final authority or appeal is another. Those are some of the pillars. And I actually think those can all be explained.
Right. And to me, that's if you get to where if you're a libertarian and you're getting to the point where those are the only 2 or 3 things you're arguing about, I think we're all in a great shape at that point, right?
Yeah, I would prefer that there was a predisposition to get to those being the only remaining arguments.
Yes.
But we all know that we don't really have a Department of Defense. If we're being honest with ourselves, we have a Department of Trouble Creation.
Yes.
That causes a lot of trouble, and it's the Pentagon is the world's largest purchasing department. There's a lot of pork and graft running through the place. Sure. So, the idea that we need the military that we have is if you're talking about defense, we could do a whole lot better with a whole lot less. Less would be better.
Agreed. 100%. Jim, what's one conspiracy theory you secretly wish was true because it would make the world more interesting? So let's start off with the basic question. Are you generally, would you label yourself a conspiracy theorist in general?
Well, I don't know if I get to, there's a certain point at which the definition of you isn't who you think you are, it's what other people think you are.
Well, what other people say then?
So I've just completed, the next one's going to be released next week, my 3rd episode discussing the Kennedy assassination. And I didn't believe in that. I was predisposed to be opposed to that up until late 2022 and did, and now I fell into the kind of the rabbit hole on this one. I'm generally biased to resist conspiracies. I find that most of them they don't even get past the smell test at the very beginning. But in this particular case, I'm out in the open. I'm on public record here. Wish was true, though. That's the thing that throws me about your question is I don't know what I wish would be true.
Right. Like, so for, as a stupid example, you might say like, oh, well, I think flat earth is a conspiracy theory, but it would be fun if the earth was flat, type of thing.
I can't think of anything.
Fair enough. If you can't think of anything, you can't think of it. That's fair enough. Yeah. Because sometimes I think what happens is like, you'll hear a conspiracy theory and like you said, the overwhelming majority don't even pass the smell test. Mm-hmm. But one of them, even though it doesn't pass the smell test, you're like, oh, I wish it kind of did so I could dig into it a little more if I had the time.
Yeah, I really did. I've spent a lot of time in the last little more than 2 years now. I have to keep track of this. It's a little more than 2 years, and I've even traveled to investigate this particular one.
The JFK one?
Yeah.
Okay. And finally, the last question, and this is based, I admit, on what I thought was the proper pronunciation of your name, which it's not. It's not Babka, it's Babka. So this one you'll have to like give me some latitude on.
Nope,
settle one of the biggest debates among old school New Yorkers. Which Babka is best, cinnamon or chocolate?
Cinnamon takes a back seat to no man, but chocolate is better. So yes, it's a sweet bread for people that don't know.
Yes.
So my name actually is very closely related to grandma. So this is a grandma's pastry is basically what it is. But it's a very interesting kind of pastry that usually has some kind of fruit in it, even though it's primarily like a chocolate or cinnamon. There's a fruit, and commonly there's a rind, like an orange rind or something in there. And these flavors combine together in a way that's a whole lot of fun. So I had a friend that picked up on this, and I make these regular trips out to in my business to out to California. And when I was out there, Hannah made me a babka by surprise, and she was sending me home with it. So I have the babka, and she wraps it in wax paper and wraps the outside of that in foil and puts a bag on top of that because she had made this and then kind of froze it, and I was going to take it home, and she was trying to package it a certain way. And she told me something before I left that didn't register completely about how I needed to pack this before I left, but I just put it in my carry-on and didn't think anything of it. And when I got through the TSA, of course, they needed to figure out what this object was, this large object in there. And it dawns on me when they're pulling me over why this is happening. Like, that's the first moment I recognized why Hannah had said all the things, that she had said. You remember the penis cartoon and the teacher like, ball, 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 ball. When she was saying all of it, it was like, what are you talking about?
Right.
But now all of a sudden, ding, it all collects. And it connects. And so I said, I pull out my ID real quick and I show it to the TSA guy. And I said, okay, here's the story. You're about to look. I really don't want you to open this package all the way. You got to do your job, but I don't want you to open this package. Here's why. I explained to him who I was, what was in the package, and had it. But it's like Seinfeld says in the episode, you can't beat a Babka.
Well, I'm also glad that we've got a Seinfeld lover or someone who at least is familiar with the show enough to pick up on the joke.